This is a new day. This is a new day full of sound and light and expectation. This day has been waiting for you. This day has been waiting especially for you, to embrace you, to guide you. This day has been waiting with open arms just for you. This is the day we have been given. Let's not waste it. Come now and let us worship together. Welcome, everybody. My name is Reverend Joseph Boyd. I am welcoming you on this beautiful February day. Nice and cold and sunny outside here in one of the greatest cities in the world, Youngstown, Ohio. And I greet you live virtually from 1105 Elm Street. For over a century, this congregation has stood for the marginalized and with the marginalized, marched for justice, and preached good news to the poor, to all those in our community. We've recently put up a Black Lives Matter banner 2 years ago to signify this place as a sanctuary and as a place that will abolish and dismantle racism. We have waved a rainbow flag outside our sanctuary for over a decade to again signify this place as a sanctuary for any and all persons who identify as LGBTQ+. It is my sincere pleasure to welcome you into this virtual space, which we've started since March 2020, and something I think we're going to continue because we've learned that we can now reach the world as well as our neighbors here in Youngstown and Pennsylvania. So from my heart to yours, I want to offer you a welcome. If you happen to be listening in or viewing us in your car or at home in Youngstown or in Trumbull County, welcome. If you happen to be in PA and grateful that you can be at home in your pajamas and your slippers and not have to brave the cold and have to get ice off your windshield, welcome. Welcome all of you in Hermitage and Meadville, PA. Welcome all of those out in Columbiana County in Ohio. And I also want to welcome all of those from coast to coast that are viewing us either this morning or later on Facebook or on YouTube. All of you from California down to South Carolina, Colorado, New York City. Welcome you all into the sanctuary. And a special shout out to all our international friends. I know I talk a lot about this nation in America, but I'm thinking about all of you. And I see this church as being part of a global cooperative. And so I welcome all of you who may be viewing us this morning or later in the day in Europe, in Brazil, in the Dominican Republic, any other countries. Please put yourself in the chat box. I'd love to get to know you and get to know where you're coming from and where you're viewing us from. So we have many events going on, not just on Sunday morning, and you'll see down in the chat box we have religious education for our children happening at 11:30 and noon Eastern Standard Time. But we also have many events happening throughout the entire week, which are open to all of you. And one project that I think is very exciting was something that was brought to me from Kathy Caget, a member of this church, as well as Jim Rogers and Linda Moan. They're making a 2020 quilt to mark this time in our history. And they're calling it UUYO, Unitarian Universalist Church of Youngstown, Our Shared Journey 2020. And I'll just read you the little blurb they have. Our UUYO leadership, Tim, Lola, Andy, all of you, aptly led us into a land of virtual technology when the pandemic started, and aided all of us, even those who were unable to connect remotely, in maintaining a strong congregation connection. We have had a safe harbor where we are heard, supported, and reminded that we are never truly alone. Let us join together in art by creating a collage that conveys how we felt or how we were positively impacted by this church community, UUYO, during this unsettling time. Create your own unique response in the form of a painting, a drawing, embroidery, writing, poetry, photo, or other art form. They're asking for a 6x6 square using heavyweight paper, cardstock, canvas, panel, or wood. And they want your piece of art or piece of poetry to go on this 6-inch by 6-inch piece of cardstock, wood, etc. And so if you want to participate in this, you can email the office@uuyo.org, and we'll arrange some kind of arrangement for you to get that to us, especially for those who may be out of state, mailing to us. We want to make sure that we get it. So again, office@uuyo.org. Email, and we'll definitely connect you to this project and make sure that we can get your art piece to include in our journey, because you've been an important part of our journey and continue to be. And you may have heard that we're reading Cast by Isabel Wilkerson. This is something that was started by Gary Davenport, and it's so popular that it looks like we're going to have multiple book groups. We've recently purchased 5 copies, and we can purchase more. We're giving these copies free to anyone who would like to participate. And so if you'd like to participate in that, again, office@uuyo.org, and we can connect you to the next reading group. And then on Saturday, February 27th at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, that's this coming Saturday, on this Zoom channel, I invite you to join me. We're going to talk about the writings of the very brilliant Bell Hooks. Bell Hooks was mentioned a few times in the last couple months. I think actually the reading that was used last Sunday was from Bell Hooks. And so we're going to discuss her writings on love. So I titled this About Love. And Bell Hooks, who is a feminist scholar, activist, author, and educator, has written extensively about love, and in particular, love as a way of being in the world that causes and nurtures social transformation. So she really takes the personal experience of love, the tenderness we feel when we know we are loved and feel that love, and then carrying that out into the social sphere, impacting the way that we engage our politics, our education system, our neighbors, our prison system, etc. So you can join me this coming Saturday on this Zoom channel, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, About Love with Bell Hooks. And now we'll go to Michael Harvey at his home for our chalice lighting.
Hello, everyone. I truly hope that you are doing better than I am during all this COVID-19 stuff. I'm going to try and keep this chalice lighting as positive as possible. I will be honest, though. I may be a failure, but I'm not a fraud. So anyhow, the prayer card that they handed out at my father's funeral, I actually found it when we were going over worship stuff last month in January. You know the one I'm talking about, prayer of St. Francis of Assisi, Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. I find it interesting that my dad was very violent, definitely did not sow a whole lot of love outside of his family, and could hold a grudge with the best of them. But he was more than that, just like all of us are, just like the yin yang sign shows. Like, in the good of us, there's some evil, and in the most evil of us, there's some good. And I wouldn't, and no one's, I wouldn't be who I am without him. And that person wants to acknowledge that he was still beautiful, even though there were terrible things about him. Just like our country is beautiful, even though there are terrible things about it currently. And I think those things that are currently happening are because we refuse to accept the fact that this country was founded on genocide, the killing of brown people, which is, we're still putting them in cages and not treating them as humans. And then it was built on the slavery of black people that we shoot in the street, even though they're obeying police orders and are unarmed. And then do our best to sweep it under the rug unless there's some type of video evidence. And so essentially, I don't want to go down that road though, and I got all kinds of stuff here. I learned a word from the Passamaquoddy tribe, Wisui Milan, which means he, she gives it back. We can't give back this country or the hundreds of years of systemic racism that has got us to this point. However, we can take this opportunity to build a new, more equitable world in the future that does recognize the humanity of all people and acknowledges their contribution to the society that we have and makes room for them in the society that we're going to have in the future. And so I don't know where we go from here. I hope that one day I'm able to start gyms that take the non-biodegradable plastic that we have, grind it up, stuff it into tires, put those into cement structures that build empires, nonprofit integrated renewable energy solutions that generate electricity and profits that are shared among us people instead of get handed up the line through some hierarchy. So I don't know. I'm just dreaming and imagining a world where we actually act the way the words that we write down, like all men are created equal. Let's start acting that way and include women. Let's let all the people who yearn to be free come to America. And I'm just going to let it go at that because I can just keep going on and on. But I just want to let you all know that I love you, and good will conquer evil, love will conquer hate. Manas, in Lakesh, namaste, Ubuntu, love. A little love goes a long way. Thank you.
Following that thoughtful presentation by Michael, let us join together and repeat the covenant of our congregation. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Each month, we give to an organization that supports transformation in our community, which is the heart of our mission. In our church's historic commitment to the well-being of our community, we give 100% of our offering to those in need. UUYO's Give Away the Plate recipient for February is Black Period. Last year, Black Period established and began to raise funds for a new kind of scholarship at Youngstown State University, the Arlene Floyd Grant and Scholarship Fund. The fund was created to remove financial challenges that African-American students face on campus and that many times become critical barriers to their success. This fund is to help with food in the form of Pete Points cards, transportation needs, books and other academic supplies, housing, storage, childcare, other school-related expenses. Black Period founder Carmela Williams said the inspiration for the Arlene Floyd Grant and Scholarship Program was based on the experiences of students that she mentored during her 12 years as the Assistant Director of Associate Degree in Tech Prep Programs at YSU. She said, I worked with first-generation African-American students, and I just saw that they had a ton of barriers to face, but didn't really have an official support system at the university that was specifically for them. Black Period was established by Ms. Williams in May 2020 as a response to the murder of George Floyd and renewed demands for racial justice across the country and in the Mahoning Valley. Black Period's mission, thus, is to raise funds and inject resources directly into the Black community. Black Period is focused on the advancement of Black people and has identified 3 pillars to engage, support, and promote opportunity, health, and justice for the Black community: economics, wellness, and civic engagement. Black Period also provides tools for white allies as they stand with the Black community against racism and injustice. We will now receive the offering that supports the life of Youngstown, the Mahoning Valley, and our wider world.
Please join me in a few moments of meditation. Get into a posture that's comfortable for you, and if you're walking or in movement, just notice your breath. If you happen to be sitting, be in an upright position, but not too strained. If you're lying down, just move your hand maybe to your belly so you can breathe and feel your breath. And we're going to breathe together right now across this country and across this world, being with each other in silence.
Following that thoughtful time of being together, let's listen to these words from Howard Thurman from his reading, The Pressure of Crisis. At the end of this reading, there's a reference to tares, T-A-R-E-S, which are weeds that grow in a grain field. So they are there, but they are also undesirable elements. Thurman writes, when Lloyd George, the British statesman, was a boy, one of his family responsibilities was to collect firewood for warmth and for cooking. He discovered early that always after a very terrific storm, with high winds and driving rain, he had very little difficulty in finding such, and more than the wood that he needed at the time. All kinds of stuff was available. When the days were beautiful, sunny, and the skies untroubled, firewood was at a premium, despite the fact that the sunny days were happy ones for him, providing him with long hours to fill his heart with delight. Nevertheless, in terms of other needs, which were his specific responsibilities, they were his most difficult times. Many years after, he realized what had been happening. During the times of heavy rains and driving winds, many of the dead limbs were broken off and many rotten trees were toppled over. The living things were thus separated from the dead things. But when the sun was shining and the weather was clear and beautiful, the dead and the not dead were undistinguishable. The experience of Lloyd George is common to us all, he says. When all is well with our world, there is often no necessity to separate the dead from the not dead in our lives. Under the pressure of crisis, when we need all available vitality, we are apt to discover that much in us is of no account, valueless. But when our tree is rocked by mighty winds, all the limbs that do not have free and easy access to what sustains the trunk are torn away. There is nothing to hold them fast. It is good to know that there is in us that is strong and solidly rooted. It is good to have the assurance that can only come from having ridden the storm and remained intact. Far beside the point is the why of the storm. And beside the point, too, may be the interpretation of the storm that makes of it an active agent of redemption. Given the storm, it is wisdom to know that when it comes, the things that are firmly held by the vitality of the life are apt to remain, chastened but confirmed, while the things that are dead, sterile or lifeless, are apt to be torn away. The wheat and tares grow up together, but when the time of harvest comes, only wheat is revealed as wheat, and tares remain what they have been all along, just tares.
The first time I was introduced to Ohio, the first time I've actually stepped foot in this state, was when I was offered a summer preaching fellowship in Shaker Heights, which is a suburb of Cleveland. I was asked to deliver 6 consecutive sermons on 6 consecutive weeks, and in return I was given a very generous stipend, especially for a student, and a lovely 6-bedroom, 3-bath home, all to myself, within walking distance of the church, while the family was away on vacation. A couple weeks before I arrived in Shaker Heights, gay marriage was made legal in all 50 states by a Supreme Court ruling, something that had been a long time coming, but had finally arrived. It was also the same year that Tamir Rice, a 12-year-old boy, was playing at the playground with a toy gun and was shot and killed by Cleveland police. I remembered reading about this when I was in New York City. And when I arrived in Shaker Heights, this was still on the lips of people's mouths, and it was still in people's minds and people's hearts, and they wanted to engage the shock and horror of this event. I had never preached 6 consecutive sermons before in my entire life. In fact, by that time, I had probably preached about 6 sermons in the space of 2 years, spaced out with lots of time in between. When I arrived at the church, the office administrator asked me if I could give her the titles for my 6 sermons, and she saw as I turned pale. I did not know I needed to give her titles for the next 6 weeks. And then she gently told me, she said, "You don't need to know what you're going to say yet. Just give me the titles. The titles will be enough." So I just gave her titles that struck some chord in me, some resonance. And I didn't know exactly what I was going to say, but I knew that these titles alone probably could provoke me into something worthwhile. So I wrote titles like The Disinherited, inspired by Howard Thurman, Returning Home, The Vision at the Top of the Ladder, thinking of Jacob's ladder. When I saw these titles, they stirred me and gave me a warm feeling. And I learned something very helpful during those weeks. I learned that it was easier to do multiple sermons in a row, week after week, than it was to do a sermon once in a while. I could get into a flow and into a rhythm. And it changed the way that I lived and how I wrote. The process became much more organic, lived, visceral, not just something I learned in a book. I learned how to listen to myself. And I learned how to pay closer attention to my life, knowing that the quality of the attention I gave my life would impact the quality of the depth and breadth of the sermon I would offer that Sunday. On more than one occasion during that time, I would get pizza delivery because I didn't have a car, and the nearest grocery store was 2 miles away, and public transit was not quite as efficient as what I was used to. One time, a young man arrived at the door who must have been in high school at the time, if I had to guess. And he came to deliver a pizza to me, and I took the box from him, and I gave him a tip. And usually that would be the end of the transaction. Usually then they would go back to their car and drive away to the next delivery. But this time, the young man just stood there. And I wasn't sure if I didn't give him enough of a tip. I wasn't sure why he was standing there. And he looked at me and he said something that completely surprised me. He said, You look like a rich man. And I told him, thinking he probably saw the house, I don't actually own this house. I'm just staying here for a period of time. I'm actually just a student. He persisted, though. He said, there is just something about you. You look rich. Can you tell me your secret? To this day, I have no memory of what my reply was. No idea what I said. But I remembered in that moment how I felt. I felt in a deep and profound way a sense that I belonged. It wasn't a sense of belonging that was tied to geography. It was a sense of belonging to a vocation, a sense that I belonged to what I was doing, and what I was doing was what I was meant to be doing. And I felt that acutely and powerfully in that moment. I'm very grateful for that young man. Very grateful. Whether he knew it or not, he was holding up a mirror of something that I could not see, an appreciation, so that I could feel in my bones a deep sense of belonging that I had been yearning for my entire life. I've had many moments like that since then. One of those moments was coming to Youngstown for the first time. And Jennifer responding while we were driving in, "You look so happy." I've had many moments like that in this beautiful congregation, full of beautiful, smart, and sincere people like all of you. It has actually been your sincerity that has captured me the most. The way you love and care for each other, and the way you show up for our wider community, especially at this time in our nation's history. All of that has melted away layers of cynicism I didn't even know I had, and has showed me what might be possible for a human community. I've been treated so kindly here, and in turn that has made me want to pay more attention to my life and treat myself and others with more kindness. You have created an incubator here, whether you know it or not, even in this virtual space, where people like myself, people perhaps like you, can find themselves as beloved, as a person with inherent mystery, inherent beauty, inherent worth, and inherent dignity. I do believe that life calls us, each of us, to discover in our own language, in our own way, through our own experience, what it feels and looks like to recognize ourselves as beloved. Ministers like myself usually are given the assumption of having a calling. But that's usually because we're pretty vocal as a group, generally speaking, and we talk ad nauseum about it. But I think it's true for all of us, each of us, this sense of calling. I've witnessed it myself, in fact. A woman in a moment of weakness finds her strength. A transgender person comes to feel their worth and a sense of safety and belonging. A man finds he is stuck and then realizes through the love of community that he has many choices and opportunities that he never saw before. For me, all of these moments of strength, all of these moments of comfort, all of these moments of realized possibility are love letters to this nation. The ways we find ourselves in sometimes unexpected ways, the ways that we mirror to each other appreciation and awe and tenderness. This is a living response to the issues we face today as a nation. And we all have the capacity to respond in our own way, through our own language, through our own bodies, with gratitude that we are given life on this day. It is a spontaneous response of discovering that we belong. We are a nation of individual persons seeking a deep and abiding sense of belonging. A belonging that is more than just the surface. Our education, our history, our accomplishments, or lack thereof. That's just the surface. We yearn, I think, for something deeper, something truer. A sense of belonging that leaves room for our inherent mystery, our inherent beauty as an individual person with specific experiences and specific gifts. If I was writing a letter to the nation, I would not start with Dear America. I would start with Dear Beloved, dear person of inherent mystery, beauty, worth, and dignity. And I would say to this person, you may have questioned whether you have ever truly belonged. You may be questioning that right now. To tell you you belong would be too easy. And perhaps you would believe me, and perhaps you would not. But what I'm talking about is not a question of belief or unbelief. It is a question of knowing beyond yes or no thinking, an embodiment of your person as a gift of this earth, a gift of the ancestors, a gift to this present crisis we are in, and a gift that will live on without end tomorrow. I would say something like, I hope the present crisis you are experiencing and that we are experiencing as a nation may cut away what is dead and no longer serves you, so that you might truly live on this day. I would probably say something like, we have each other and we are breathing together in this moment. And for me, that is enough to know that love is real. Perhaps the only real thing. We are in this present crisis together. Though yours may be and feel fundamentally different than mine, together, I think we can find the calm in the center of this storm. And that calm center is the truth of being beloved, now and always. Now and always. Just this week, I learned on the news of a trans woman, 24 years old, Hispanic, who was murdered brutally on her front lawn by a man less than 30 minutes from here. The police arrived and demanded that the man stop beating her, and when he didn't, they shot and killed him. Then they took her to the hospital at St. Elizabeth's, less than half a mile away from where I'm standing right now, and then she passed away. I include her and her family into our thoughts and into our service this morning. I think we all need to hear the message of beloved community. But that message is more pressing for those who face real life and death on the streets of this nation. As many of you know, we've recently added a principle to this church to create beloved community by abolishing racism, dismantling white supremacy and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. How do we do that? I was recently on a Zoom call, and on the call was a 90-year-old African-American woman in Harlem who shared with the group that she is dependent on nurses to come to her to administer care. She said some of them are really friendly, but they're not very reliable. She said some are very punctual and very reliable, but they're not very friendly. She said she has this practice she now uses with everybody she meets. She says in her mind, "I love you. I love you." And then she sees how she would talk and treat someone that she loves. She told the group that all the nurses have now become her daughters, part of her family, though she never tells them this. She said, "It's amazing to watch someone transform right in front of your eyes when you see them as your beloved child." I think that's a wonderful, wonderful, and very practical way of practicing beloved community. Creating first in the mind and the heart, and acting day, moment by moment, on that transformed view of other people. I love you. I love you. I really like the word in the principle dismantle. Dismantle. It means that perhaps we don't need to do anything special. We may just need to undo habits of doing and seeing and relating. In my opinion, I think what we're dismantling primarily is indifference in ourselves and indifference in our institutions. I think it is a small minority of people that live their lives motivated by hatred, conscious hatred. They are certainly there, and there is great pain there in themselves and in their actions. But they are not the great majority of this nation or of this world. Instead, I think the most prevalent thing that keeps this nation stuck in patterns of oppressive thought and action is indifference. To be more to the point, I think the great majority of people have become seduced into thinking that they don't have enough time or energy to devote to creating beloved community. Few, I think, are against the idea, though there may be disagreement about tactics. But many, I think, feel, I want to accomplish something in my life. I want to attain a position. I want some material security. I want to protect what I have. In short, if I can find a way to navigate through institutions that dehumanize a great portion of this population and eke out a decent living, and maybe help my children eke out a decent living and have an okay life, that's going to take all I've got. What I think this points to is something very true. Creating beloved community is not a weekend project or something we can do when we have the time or the energy. Creating beloved community is a moment-by-moment awareness of ourselves as inherently beloved, and all persons as inherently beloved, and letting that guide our day-to-day, moment-to-moment activity. What I think is very true is that if one lives with the awareness that they are inherently beloved, there is a kind of freedom and letting go that happens that can seem very foreign and very scary. If we quit trying to prove our worth through gaining prestige, gaining wealth, reputation, if we let that go, we find a different kind of life emerging. And we probably find we have less tolerance for navigating systems that are inherently violent and dehumanizing. And then before you know it, you've become a radical for love. We really like these radicals, especially radicals for love, but we see what happens to them in this country. And we really don't want that for ourselves. So that's understandable. It is true that sadly it is a radical notion that each of us has inherent worth and dignity. And that understanding should guide our politics, guide our economic life, guide our healthcare system, guide our educational system. But in my experience, encouragement comes along sometimes in surprising ways. I have found that sometimes you're speaking with someone and they say, "You seem like a rich person. Can you tell me your secret?" And you may have no idea what to say. And in the end, the words really don't matter. But you will know how it feels to know what you want to do with your life. You will know that creating beloved community is not some far-off goal, but a lived reality and experience. If we can only let go of all that holds us back from realizing we don't need to prove anything to anyone. We are inherently worthy of love. Inherently. We are more than the sum of our experiences. We are indeed a great mystery and a container of unspeakable beauty. And in that knowing, we can't help but share the good news with a weary person in a devastating, violent, and beautiful nation. You belong. You belong. You belong. Please pray with me. Spirit of love, we are grateful for the gift of life on this day. We are grateful for the gift of community that we have found virtually and in our imagination through our experience of breathing and knowing that we each depend on each other for that breath. If we are afraid, please guide us through the help of community into a life of courage. If we are weary and tired, may we find rest in you, Spirit of love, and through the actions of loving kindness toward everyone. To all those who are hurting this morning, we offer a prayer of healing. We include them in our circle of love. And for all those who are the victims of violence, we offer a balm of clarity and truth that the beloved community is in fact here, if we can realize it. Guide us this day into a life of beauty, worthiness, and dignity that is our nature. All this we pray. Amen.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we keep in our hearts until we meet again.
As you depart, please remember the one great fact: you are loved and never truly alone. Welcome, everybody.